So next I'm going to sew along here with the big needle again in the next join. Before I sew this, I'll do this last with a smaller needle, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the needle up through here from the back, try to bring it out right here next to the patch through the seam. So I push, not there, push, and here it comes. You can see I've brought the needle out in the seam right next to the patch. Alright, and so I've put a bit of bond on here so that this part here won't move or anything too much after it's all finished. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use this to make a bit of a seam there as I go, and then stitch as I go. So, where's my needle? Oh. Okay, so I'm just gonna, so the threads come from underneath, and I'm just gonna, about 4 mil in, gonna push the needle back through the seam. And put a bit of pressure on it, and you can see, where are we? There you go. You can see here we've got the start of our line, our join line. Now when you bring the needle back through from the bottom, it can be a bit of a pain because when the needle pushing, it tends to pull the patch away from the seam, so that line you make, you can lose it fairly easily if you're not careful. Once again, this one I bring it out fairly close to the patch. It can be quite difficult to get it in exactly the same line because you're doing it in a join and you want it to look like a join. It can be quite frustrating. But then what I do, I put my little thing in there again to make the join. This is probably not how the guys in the shop do it, but like I said, I didn't really have much tuition in this, so it's just a bit of play by ear. And pull. And you can see the join starting to come along there. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's what it looks like after I've finished the stitching. So I've stitched down here first, and then I stitched up here next. It's not the neatest I've ever done, but for a DIY I think it's no problem. And then next what we have to do is we have to stitch around the outside, and then it will be finished. I usually try to use a small needle, a round needle, not the tri-cut one, as I think the tri-cut one can damage this stuff and tends to rip fairly easily, so I just use the round one. If it's already damaged enough to rip through here, if you've got a triangular needle cutting the leather, easy to rip I think later, so I generally try to use a round needle. So I use one of my small needles with the thick thread. You can see here there's a few ripples in the thing, but as I stitch, generally I stretch and pull the leather and try to make it smooth so it won't look as bad as what it looks now. And I've tried to keep it in line with these stitching on the wrist area. I try to keep around that area. Anyway, let's go. This time I've got my smaller round needle. They're thinner and break a lot easier, so you have to be careful with these. I'm going to start from the back and come up around here where the join is and work my way around. This time I won't be going through the actual kote, but just through the leather itself, not right through the leather, but it depends on the thickness of the leather. Sometimes it might go right through, sometimes just through the surface. It depends on the thickness, but I try not to go right through. It's harder to pull the needles out. So generally just through the surface is okay, not through the whole thickness of the needle. So from the inside I'm starting, try to come out somewhere near there, and I'm bringing the needle out right there. And I'm using my thick thread, not my thin thread. And now what you try, it's a bit hard because the knuckles are kind of curved, so it's a bit hard to show you. But once again, as always, you come from the bottom of the patch and then you go through the top of the patch. Now this time, a bit different from this patch that we did. So this time what we're going to do, we're going to go through the leather on a bit of a diagonal angle. Don't know if you can see that. So I want to come through. Hang on, let me get the camera right. Something like that. So you want to go through the leather and cut the needle, come out through the kote leather just a little bit up the road from where you went in. It's a bit hard here. I don't know if you can see that, but I've put the needle in the first stitch and I've come out through the side of the blue leather, not through the bottom of the blue leather, but through the side. That helps keep the leather flat on the kote. If you go right through the bottom of the leather, you get the edge of the kote sticking, like doesn't really flatten. And then you can see I've gone about 4 mil, I suppose, up from where I put it in. And then you want to come out right next to the patch, or if you can, even slightly under, just directly under it, not too far out and not too far under. So then once again you use this jobby to push. This is quite a tricky patch, but once you've done a couple, they're not my favourite things to do. And then give it a bit of tension and pull, and then you put the needle in where that thread has come out in the kote leather. Then you put the needle in next to that and then come out again up the road. So here we go. Now, this stitching, you see I've stitched quite large. It depends on the type. If you've got really good kote, you might want to do small stitches. That way it looks really nice and neat. But then again, you put more holes in the leather, and if it's already going bad, you don't want too many holes. So I generally go fairly large. It's less stitching, less holes, and you get the job done quicker. But then you don't want to go too far apart, but that's about the max. That's about 5 mil now. Difficult. It's a difficult patch to do, this one. You can see there it's coming along. I normally do smaller stitching, but just for purpose sake I'm just showing you large ones.